Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is Ukraine war, geopolitical, breaking news, update, segment video. Whatever. This is such a big bit of news. It deserves a video on its own. I could not do this justice in my geopolitical news update. This is massive, probably one of the biggest things that's happened since the beginning of the war. Like outside the war itself, we have overt acceptance from the Department of Justice in the US that Russia is meddling in the American elections and in the whole information landscape. I talk about this all the time. I don't want to say I told you so, but I frickin' told you so. Okay, this blows my mind on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's like, well, yeah. So this is huge news. And it goes much further than many people will understand. And I am afraid that it's probably not going to be reported in the US in the way that it should be to the people it should be. So this particularly affects the right-wing ecosystem, information ecosystem in the US. And I wonder how Fox News will report it. And I wonder what they'll say about people that they otherwise hold up in high regard. Because these are the people who have been compromised by the Russian influence, as according to the latest indictments. Okay, I speak about disinformation all the time. It is one of the things that I am obsessed with and insanely worried about. We are at a moment in time where we talk often about national security, obviously in terms of war and etc., cyber security, but also, as I've said many times, epistemic security. Epistemology is a study of knowledge and truth in philosophy, and we are going through a moment of epistemic crisis where we are not sure what is true and what is not true, what is right and what is wrong. The information spaces are muddied, and we are being manipulated consistently by nefarious state actors and smaller actors and entities within states that want to manipulate you and I, you and me, in order to further their own agenda, whatever that may be. Okay, so what has happened? The DOJ, Department of Justice, is alleging that Russia has funded a US media company linked to right-wing social media stars. So that's part of it. Just to read this excerpt from CNN from last night. On Wednesday, the Biden administration announced a sweeping set of actions to tackle a major Russian government-backed effort to influence the 2024 US presidential election, including sanctions on 10 individuals and entities and the seizure of 32 internet domains. At Russian President Vladimir Putin's direction, 3 Russian companies used fake profiles to promote false narratives on social media. US Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco said in a statement, internal documents produced by one of those Russian companies show one of the goals of the propaganda effort was to boost the candidacy of Trump or whoever emerged as a Republican nominee for president, according to the FBI affidavit. Okay, if we go to Axios, we get a nice overview of what's gone on here. Russia-backed widespread election interference scheme, DOJ says. So Justice Department announced Wednesday that seizing 32 domains tied to Russian influence campaign accused of spreading propaganda to influence voters in US and foreign elections. Why it matters. Members of Russian President Vladimir Putin's inner circle directed Russian companies to promote disinformation as part of a campaign to influence the 2024 election. The DOJ alleged, quote, the sites we are seizing today are filled with Russian government propaganda that had been created by the Kremlin to reduce international support for Ukraine, bolster pro-Russian policies and interests, and influence voters in the United States and other countries, Attorney General Merrick Garland said in a statement Wednesday. Driving the news, the DOJ also announced changes Wednesday against Russian nationals connected to an alleged scheme to influence US audiences with content that included hidden Russian government messaging. So, court documents allege that RT, so Russia Today, a Russian state media network previously called Russia Today, deployed nearly $10 million to finance and direct a Tennessee-based online content creation company that has posted nearly 2,000 videos in English focused on key domestic and foreign issues to, quote, amplify divisions in the United States. Exactly what I talked about for a long time, which is where Russia take what might be genuine issues in any given country, say, for example, in Europe and the EU, they'll take immigration. People have bona fide, genuine issues with immigration or concerns or whatever. but they'll take a divisive topic and they will amplify either one side or sometimes both sides to cause division in the country, and amplify topics so that they appear to be far more problematic than they really are, right? That's something they're very good at. So here it's about amplifying divisions in the United States, taking culture wars issues, LBGT, Q, etc., transgender toilets, something that has absolutely minimal impact on people's everyday lives. Right? It's not something you're going to come across on a daily basis. Will be amplified to be, oh my goodness, what an issue this is for society. And Russia's so often behind these issues. Now, again, not to say there aren't debates to be had around these issues. I don't want to get into the long weeds of particular issues, but notice that it's those divisive topics that Russia will be, there will be little cracks in society, and they'll be getting a wedge, and they'll be whacking that wedge in the crack to make a chasm, to divide society, to cause chaos and division. And out of that emerges someone politically, a party, a presidential nominee who will be who Russia wants in order to achieve their international objectives, their geopolitical strategies and intentions. If they can get that person in through this this mechanism, this process of division and culture wars, etc., you get that person in, and that's your man or woman, but generally that's your man who's gonna achieve your objectives. Okay, Konstantin Kalashnikov and Elena Afanasieva were charged with conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Both are still at large. Now, remember, Scott Ritter's just been looked at in with regard to FARA, and a number of other American citizens who appear to be witting or unwitting agents of the Kremlin are being very closely monitored. 32-page indictment alleges that the pair worked to deceive 2 US online commentators who have millions of YouTube subscribers, falsely claiming the company was sponsored by a fictional private investor. And we'll get onto this soon. Okay, zooming out. The influence campaigns disrupted by the DOJ are known colloquially as Doppelganger. 3 Russian companies directed by the Russian presidential administration use the seized domains not only to influence voters, but also to reduce international support for Ukraine amid the ongoing war and promote pro-Russian policies. Some of the domains include cyber-squatted sites publishing disinformation meant to resemble legitimate news outlets like the Washington Post and Fox News. So we've talked about this before with like European Voice or something, that site that's supposed to look like a genuine site, or sometimes completely mimic other sites. So you think you're reading, say, the Washington Post or Fox News, and actually you're reading this Doppelganger site that has completely false information on it that is pro-Russian. So that's part of this indictment and investigation. Okay. So the affidavit alleges the campaign employed worldwide influencers, used paid ads on social media, and developed fake social media profiles using posing as US citizens to boost viewership. Okay, the state of play. The Good Old USA Project, guerrilla media campaign in the United States, and the, quote, US Social Media Influencer Network Project were 3 campaigns directed at influencing US audiences per court filings. While the court filings block out the names of presidential candidates and parties, context in the documents makes them identifiable. For example, in the Good Old USA Project document, a section on target audiences identifies residents of conservative states who more often vote for candidates of the US political party A. So in other words, we know that we're talking about the Republican Party here. So catch up quick, the US Treasury Department also announced Wednesday it had designated 10 individuals and 2 entities in response to Moscow's malign influence efforts targeting the 2024 presidential election. So alongside this, there's also your kind of, I would say, bog standard, but bog standard sanctioning of people and entities. I would argue some of these are long overdue, but good to see that happening too. So the announcement builds on March Treasury announcement identifying 2 individuals and 2 companies, both of which were entities named in Wednesday's DOJ affidavit. So the sanctions are sitting alongside this affidavit and actually are integrated with it. as connected to Doppelganger. In its Wednesday sanctions announcement, the Treasury Department said RT began an, quote, even more nefarious effort to covertly recruit unwitting American influencers starting in early 2024 and used a front company to disguise its own involvement or the involvement of the Russian government in content shared to US audiences. And we're going to look at all of this in a second. This is going to be a pretty chunky video because it's so freaking important. It also took action against RAHDIT, which is this one up here. I presume the... actually, no, I don't know what that one is. Anyway, a pro-Kremlin hacktivist group, the department said, is composed of active and former Russian intelligence officers. Okay, Secretary of State Antony Blinken condemned Moscow's alleged interference in a press release Wednesday, stating, quote, today's announcement highlights the lengths some foreign governments go to undermine American democratic institutions. A Wednesday State Department release said individuals who provide, quote, certain information on RAHDIT, so this hacktivist group, could be eligible for a reward of up to $10 million or relocation under the Rewards for Justice program. The department also announced a new policy restricting visa issuance to, quote, certain individuals who, acting on behalf of Kremlin-supported media organizations, use those organizations as cover for covert activities. Okay. So that gives you a really good overview of what's going on. I just want to dip into this NBC News article as well to give you some further meat to those bones. So Russian money was funneled to right-wing creators through a pro-Trump media outlet, according to prosecutors. And indeed, if we listen to, I don't know if I can play this, it might be worth... no, you've got Merrick Garland there talking. It doesn't seem to want to go through that. I can play you that separately. So employees of Russia-backed media network RT funded and directed a scheme that sent millions of dollars to prominent right-wing commentators throughout the media company. That appears to match the description of Tenet Media. So Tenet Media is this Tennessee-based media company that people are, it's not named in the affidavit, but you're putting stuff together and people have worked out, journalists have worked out it's Tenet Media. And it makes loads of sense. And we're going to look into Tenet Media and their involvement with some massive right-wing social media influencers. Okay. A leading platform for pro-Trump voices, according to the NBC News review of charging documents, business records, and social media profiles. The indictment on Wednesday of two RT employees, so that's Kalashnikov and Afanasieva, includes allegations that the duo implemented a nearly $10 million plan to fund an unnamed Tennessee-based company as one of their covert projects to influence American politics by posting videos on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Okay, so Tenet Media not only produces content, and we can see that people like Elon Musk have reposted their content, but they also appear to be kind of outsourcing work to some of these big name content providers. Okay, the company's description matches that of Tenet Media, according to the review by NBC News of details included in the indictment. Prosecutors said that the website of Company One describes itself as a network of heterodox commentators that focus on Western political and cultural issues. And heterodox is kind of a euphemism these days for like stuff that leads you to the alt-right. I call it one of these gateway drug. You get gateway drug people. So I'd say that Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray, and I've argued this with my friends who have gone down the Jordan Peterson route. And yeah, he might have some great stuff to say here and there. But if you're going to go all in on Jordan Peterson, you will end up starting here and ending up there. And then you'll take Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray, this person, that person. And then before you know it, you are absolutely deep in the weeds of far-right activism and far-right ideology. You don't always do that, but I have friends who have done that, and they've gone down that route, and they are there. And I warned them at the beginning, you will end up there, and they started here, and they've ended up there. And I said, I told you so. So there are these gateway drugs people, and there are and influencers like Tim Pool, although Tim Pool's pretty much you're already there. But also there are these big old signposts and words. Heterodox is one of them. Anyway, the exact same language used by Tenet Media on its website Focus on Western political and cultural issues. That's a big thing. So it's these culture war issues that are so divisive that are often the topics for a lot of these videos. And you don't think it's overtly political. You don't think it's like Russia wouldn't be involved in transgender toilets issues, right? Yes, they would. And it's exactly how they go about doing their work. So the exact same language used by Tenet Media on its website and social media channels. The indictment also states that Company 1 is registered in Tennessee and changed its name in about May the 22nd, 2023. Tennessee Secretary of State records found by NBC News show that Tenet Media entered its new assumed name on the same date. Tenet has partnered with 6 commentators. Right, this is where it gets to the point where we're understanding exactly who is involved in being influenced by Tenet Media. So 6 commentators: Lauren Southern, Tim Pool, Taylor Hanson, Matt Christensen, Dave Rubin, and Benny Johnson. We're going to look at just 3 of these, but I could have looked at more of them. The indictment refers to 6 commentators who are not named. Details included in the indictment match those of 2 of Tenet's personalities, Rubin and Poole. As of Wednesday, The Rubin Report YouTube channel had 2.44 million subscribers. The indictment refers to commentator 1 as having 2.4 million YouTube subscribers. A person with over 1.3 million YouTube subscribers is referred to as commentator 2. Poole now has 1.37 million subscribers. The indictment also refers to 3 other commentators, including one with a female pronoun, but lacked any information that could directly identify their channels. It's unclear from the indictment the extent to which each of the commentators realised, and this is key, okay? Well, kind of key. Some people saying actually it's not key at all. It doesn't matter whether you're witting or unwitting. You are still a useful idiot or a tool, or you are an agent yourself, right? It's the same outcome, isn't it? Anyway, it's unclear from the indictment the extent of which of each of the commentators realised where the money was coming from, though it stated that commentator 1 and commentator 2 were unaware they were being paid by Russian efforts and had been deceived about the source of the funding. It found that $8.7 million was eventually sent to the production companies of commentator 1, commentator 2, and commentator 3 alone. So these top 3 of them have received $8.7 million for their content that is aligned with the Russian agenda. The payments allegedly made up 90% of the deposits made by the company's account between October 2023 and August 2024. Tenet Media did not immediately respond for a request for comment from NBC News. A representative for RT responded to a request to comment with a series of text messages, including "ha ha 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 ha!" exclamation mark and quote, "We gotta earn our Kremlin paycheck somehow." So obviously RT just not really bothered. Paul said in part in a lengthy statement on Twitter, we'll dip into this later, it's now gone from his Twitter account, it appears. At least the link I had is now not working. Should these allegations prove true, I as well as other personalities and commentators were deceived and are victims. I cannot speak for anyone else at the company as to what they do or what they are instructed. It's just so depressing that you got a big company like Tim. I'm just some bloke on the internet, right? And this is my job and this is what I do like every day. But I am absolutely driven by accuracy and by like all I do is just express my brain, right? I'm not being manipulated in any way by other entities, feeding me motivation to say particular things, right? I say what I say, and if you like it, you guys support me, and that's amazing. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to do this. But I am not tailoring what I say to what you guys want me to say, which is why, even though like half of you guys are certainly the beginning of my journey, half of you would have been Republicans interested in the war and half of you Democrats and whatever, and I do my political analyses with my biases, and I will tell you my biases, but I'm not changing what I say, or I'm not saying things because I'm being paid by some entity to say them, right? And I certainly don't have a company and blah, blah, blah. Like these, what we don't realize sometimes, these big YouTubers that you can sit there and listen to, like Tim Pool, this is a company where they are at some point compromised, I think, by much more easily able to be compromised by entities that can approach them and feed them money and feed them the motivation to be strongly aligned with false, disinformative narratives from a state actor. They're just, I don't know. I suppose in some sense I'm gonna, oh, look at me, I'm morally fine and these guys are horrible. But in a sense, that's really what I'm saying. Is like, it blows my mind that people can throw away, and I do wonder actually how much is what they believe and how much they say is stuff that they know is false. And we're going to come on to a video later where I look at Tim Pool saying something, and I showed you the video the other day where he's like, Ukraine are the evil, blah, blah, he's banging the table. And you're like, do you genuinely believe that? Are you so deep in that information space that actually this is aligning with what you believe? In other words, actually there's no real difference between you and I, because you believe that is genuinely morally correct. And I believe what I say is genuinely morally correct. And actually there's no difference. It's just like garbage in, garbage out. So maybe you are a victim of being sent down this rabbit hole where you come to a place where your ideology is so far removed from mine, but you genuinely believe it and you genuinely believe it's true. Or are you a total grifter that is saying stuff that you know is not really true, or you've really heightened it, or you're playing on these rhetorical flourishes to the point where you're actually being disingenuous? Like, I have rhetorical flourishes, but they are rhetorical flourishes because I'm genuinely bloody angry. And when I hit the table, is because it blows my mind that people can be so morally bankrupt. Whereas when I see Tim Pool hitting the table, I just think grifter. And but maybe he genuinely believes that. But then it gets back to this point of like, it doesn't really matter. The outcome is still the same, that there is disinformation being spread, whether you are witting or unwitting. Anyway, that's a massive diversion, but it is a really interesting discussion to have. Right, Benny Johnson, who is another one of the main recipients of this funding, also on Twitter said, a year ago, a media startup pitched my company to provide content to it as an independent contractor. Our lawyers, I mean, this, when I talk back to these things being big entities, they are information machines that are, I just think you get a sense of, I've got personal integrity. So everything I do is about my personal integrity. And I just couldn't sit here and tell you something that was overtly false and that I knew was false. But when you start having a machine where it isn't just one person, it's a whole group of people, and it's all about, I guess, making a profit, and this becomes a big company, then you have, I think, the ability to be ethically compromised far more easily, because it becomes about profit. Rather than, you can get corporations and companies and organizations, obviously, that are absolutely ethically motivated and they are understood by their ethics. But I don't know that Tim Pool and his YouTube channel is that, or Benny Johnson in this case. So, when he says, our lawyers negotiated a standard arm's length deal with Tenet Media, that is, which was later terminated. We are disturbed by the allegations in today's indictment, which make it clear that myself and other influencers were victims of the alleged scheme. My lawyers will handle anyone who states or suggests otherwise. Hansen said in part on, so this is someone else, on Twitter, these allegations come as a complete shock to me and other hosts on Tenet Media. I want to be as clear as possible. I was never directed to report on any topic and had complete freedom and control over my reporting at all times. I would never agree to any arrangement where I'm not the sole person in charge of the stories I cover and content I create. So that's kind of talking to the stuff I was just mentioning. just discussing. Rubin said, in part on Twitter, these allegations clearly show that I and other commentators were victims of this scheme. I knew absolutely nothing about any of this fraudulent activity, period. And Christensen said, in part on Twitter, at no point has anyone ever directed me to say or not to say that, and I would never agree to anything otherwise. My videos and streams for Tenet are exactly the same as my videos and streams on my personal channels. Every word is from me and me alone. Okay, so the position of these people who have been essentially doing work on behalf of the Kremlin is that, hey, I'm the victim. I'm not the perpetrator. I'm the victim. And two, broadly speaking, it seems most of them are like, at least these other ones, these last three, who are, I think, smaller than Poole and Benny Johnson in terms of the money they've received. But these three at the end have said, no, I'm more likely to. Well, I am someone who would say these things anyway. If there's an alignment with the Russian narrative, it's an alignment which is exactly in accordance with my own personal beliefs. That isn't an alignment that is compromised by money and tenant media. Okay, so here we have Merrick Garland talking, although this is quite a long 5 minutes or so. I won't go into it now because it would make the video too long. But he said, we unsealed an indictment of 2 Russian-based employees of RT, a Russian state-controlled media outlet. They are charged with conspiring to commit money laundering and to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act. So the US company at the center of the Russian plot uses the same slogan, the indictment notes, as Tenet Media, home of Lauren Southern, Tim Poole, Benny Johnson, among others. And then, lots of people now bringing to fore, the Tenet Media infographics and whatnot. Fearless voices live here. The idea that you are fearless, you're being courageous in saying things that go against the grain. They go against the grain because the grain is the US grain, and going against it is by taking a position that is anti-American or anti-American values or whatever. Tenet Media spreads tons of disinformation, LGBTQ hate, etc., etc. So those culture war issues. Anyway, here we have from the account of Tenet Media, an entity named in the DOJ, Russian influence documents. We have Tenet Media saying in a post-interview recap, Tucker Carlson slams US foreign policy and says its demands for Russia to give up certain territories are unrealistic. So you've got this involvement with the whole ecosystem. You've got your Tucker Carlsons. Now, he may not be involved in this directly, but you've got Tenet Media as an example, amplifying Tucker Carlson's message because it perfectly aligns with the Russian narrative. And then we have these questions about, does Tucker Carlson really believe this, or is he just a giant grifter, etc., etc. And there is this symbiotic relationship between the Russian entities and in this case, American entities. Now, Julia Davis on the sanction side of things, and also on the story with Tenet Media, says Russian state broadcaster RT and its employees, included the charged defendants, co-opted online commentators by funneling them nearly $10 million to pump pro-Russian propaganda disinformation across social media and to US audiences. Now, she has been massive with her YouTube channel, Russian Media Monitor. She translates all these propagandists like Margarita Simonyan, who has now been sanctioned finally. Just in the US Treasury Department has announced sanctions against Kremlin propagandist Simonyan, Russia Today Media Group and its subsidiaries, including RAA Novosti, RT, Ruppli and Sputnik. So all of those disinformation outlets have now been sanctioned. I don't know why it's taken 2.5 years. It should have happened previously, but it's happened now. And actually, Julia Davis needs some props for being hard on these people, writing quite often in places like CEPA and Daily Beast, writing pieces on Russian genocidal rhetoric, disinformation, and these propagandists. So good on her for being at least somewhat involved in this whole story, if you take it to a zoomed out perspective. Okay. You're telling me, says Stephen Monicelli, you're telling me that Tenet Media, the Blaze Media, Turning Point USA adjacent outlet that features Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Texas's own Taylor Hanson, has been secretly funded and directed by Russia Today employees? Absolutely. Now, it's interesting that there are other media outlets like Blaze Media, that kind of right-wing libertarian, and Turning Point USA. Turning Point originally came from the UK, and Turning Point USA was the US version with people like Charlie Kirk. All these right-wing, huge right-wing names are entities that are involved in spreading pro-Russian narrative. Now, these guys, this is where it's like trying to untangle why they do this and what's the outcome, and why the Republican Party, through its MAGA influence, has become so aligned with Russian objectives, whereas the old GOP, Republican Party of the Reagan era, would be where the Democratic Party is now. I don't understand what's happened, but it does seem to me like the right-wing ecosystem, information space ecosystem in the US has been thoroughly compromised, and there will be witting and unwitting agents here. Now, whether Tim Pool is witting or unwitting, I guess we won't know for sure. He's going to deny it, obviously, and let his lawyers do the work. Blaze Media, Turning Point USA, and these other media sites and organizations, they are playing a role. How much are they witting or unwitting variables in this media mechanism that is allowing Russian narrative to find purchase in the US population? Anyway, Tucker Carlson, so remember he went over to Moscow to interview Putin and allow Putin to just splurge his disinformation onto the airwaves, allowed Putin's narrative to find purchase amongst US population, and they have regurgitated that at Trump rallies, etc., like I've shown you on video. Tucker Carlson's video where he went around a grocery shop or a supermarket in Moscow saying, wow, this is amazing, and talking just like he'd never been to a grocery shop before. And anyway, I won't revisit that too much. But that was seen, that was mentioned in this affidavit. So Tucker Carlson's video in a Russian grocery store was apparently deemed not subtle enough for Russian influence operation. So there's a quote in the affidavit from, so you had producer 1, privately messaged founder 2. So you've got all these commentators and entities, producers and founders mentioned not by name. But anyway, one of these people mentioned in the affidavit said they want me to post this, i.e. the video of Tucker Carlson, referencing the video that Afanasieva had posted. So that's someone who is named in the affidavit and is at large at the moment and is wanted, had posted, but it, quote, it just feels like overt shilling. So someone's saying, yeah, I know they want me to post this, like Afanasieva has posted, but I don't want to post this because it is too much like Russian shilling. It's too obviously pro-Russian. That's Tucker Carlson. I think that's that little nugget from the affidavit is fascinating. Anyway, the indictment alleges that right-wing commentators like Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, Lawrence Southern, we're going to look at those first three just a little bit, have been unwittingly working for a Russian influence operation. 2 people described in the Tenet indictment as unnamed founders, like we just saw, were very aware their operation was funded by Russians. So there are other people that we don't quite know yet who definitely were witting. They were very cognizant that the money was coming from Russia, and hence this video looks a bit too obvious. It might be too much of a signal that we are being funded by the Russians. But anyway, there you go. Tennessee Business Records lists Tenet's founders as Blaze TV host and Turning Point USA contributor Lauren Chen, aka roaming millennial, and her husband. So it could be. So when we talked about Blaze TV earlier and Turning Point USA, you have people within those organizations, a contributor who does appear to be a witting agent in this whole process. So yeah, funny moment in the Tenet indictment. A Tenet founder who has told YouTubers their funding is coming from Western European businessmen emails the investor for more money. When no one responds, Tenet's founder drops the pretense and Google's time in Moscow. Tim Pool says he didn't know Tenet was a Russian operation, says he's a victim. A commentator in the indictment, who appears to be Pool, made £100,000 per episode for Tenet. Okay, so this is a big point here, is that Tim Pool was getting $100,000 per episode. Like, what? Someone came up to me and said, I'm going to give you $100,000 per episode when you're talking about stuff like this. I guess it comes down to if that aligned with my own moral disposition and moral conclusions, then I guess I wouldn't have a problem with that. If someone said, hey, all that stuff that's really pro-Ukrainian and all the kind of pro-accuracy stuff that you talk about and anti-disinformation, if someone came up to me, I'm thinking out loud here, and said, I'm going to give you $100,000, well, my first question is, why would you want to do that? I'd have to think long and hard about that. I certainly wouldn't be one that would go, okay, right, brilliant, excellent, take that. Because at some point, you could be compromised. So they say, right, we've given you all this money, now you need to say this, or you need to do this, or we want you to do that, and it's a way of getting their claws into me. I don't know. No one's ever going to do that, but I wonder how I'd react. So it's easy for me to criticize Tim Pool because I want to be fair here, right? But I also massively disagree with virtually everything Tim Pool says. So there's all sorts of stuff going on in my head as I'm discussing this. Anyway, wild night on Tim Pool's YouTube show tonight after the Tenet media indictment. When I first learned of this story, I was skateboarding, he said, and so on and so forth. So lots of people, wittingly or unwittingly. So Julia Davis here says, or wittingly. Let's have a look at part of the indictment. Despite describing US Company 1's investor to Commentator 1 and Commentator 2, so that's going to be Pool and Johnson, as Edward Grigorian, a purported finance professional in Western Europe, Founder 1 and Founder 2 admitted to each other in their private communications that their investors were in truth and in fact the Russians, the same term the Founder 1 and Founder 2 previously used to refer to RT while working directly under contract with RT as described above. So that is again Founder 1 and Founder 2, whoever they are. Could it be Chen, who is involved as a content provider, I guess a contributor to Blaze? I don't know. Founder 1 message Founder 2 on Discord, I'm going to ask the Russians about hiring Producer 2 this coming week. Approximately 2 days later, Founder 1 message Producer 2 on Discord. Here's a list of responsibilities I sent over to the investors to approve bringing you on. Waiting to hear back on timeline and salary. On or about August the 8th, 2023. Persona 1 informed Founder 1 and Founder 2 in Discord that their request to hire a producer booker, Producer 2, was approved. So there seems to be a lot of wittingness involved, at least at certain levels of this. Right, as James here says, finding out that people I disliked for being terrible human beings are also assets of a hostile foreign power. In other words, yeah, there is a sense of kind of I told you so, and a sense of, yeah, this all makes sense. And I feel better that I thought you were bad guys, and it turns out you were doing bad guy things. There is a kind of pat on the back kind of element to that. Okay, now this is a super important point from Michael Weiss, the journalist. Witting or unwitting doesn't always matter. In many cases, the Russian services prefer it if you don't know you're working for them. The least trustworthy assets historically are those who do it for the money. If they're your targets, it is best to hide who you are precisely because of their mercenary, duplicitous nature. And this is kind of what I was talking to, that kind of corporate entity nature of, say, the Tim Pool YouTube media company thing, I think allows them to be compromised. I don't know. Like an individual can be very easily compromised because there's only one person. But I think once you start acting like this as a media corporation, it becomes an entirely, I think, a money-making enterprise. And so therefore, your ideology is just aligned with where your money comes from. I think much more so than an individual like me. I could be wrong. There was a time when the thought of working for Moscow for money was anathema to those who happily volunteered to do so, idealistic communists or anti-fascists in the 20s and 30s. So when you have like espionage and you have a spy and then a double agent and then a triple agent, you have ideology playing quite a large part often. And people, certainly with activists who were on the ground talking ideology, it was the ideology that drove them, right? Now it appears that grifting is the ideology of the 21st century. Cynicism and Stalinism led to the decline of the species of agents, among other degenerative tendencies, and still later in the Cold War recalled that Oleg Gordievsky and Aldrich Ames, he was a greedy bastard. Another type is the eccentric egomaniac who thinks he possesses a special talent for discovery or some secret knowledge which his handler is all too eager to encourage him to keep on thinking he possesses. The man spoon-fed falsehoods cooked up in Russia who passes them off as his own rejoinder to the conventional wisdom or mainstream corporate media is catnip to RIS. Usually the handler rightly thinks such an agent is an imbecile. Okay, so we're digressing somewhat, but the question is, grifting or ideology, ideology is maybe too strong a word here, maybe thinking it's true or shifting what you think is true because you're being paid to say so. And it could be that actually you are being initially disingenuous, but then the grifting takes you into that information space where you spiral down to actually believing that. So that could be an element there. Anyway, point being that Russia's paid Tim Pool $5 million a year. And that's crazy. So the Russians asked Chen to recruit Benny Johnson and Tim Pool to make some content and offer $2 million a year each. Johnson said he wanted $5 million. Pool demanded $10,000 per episode. The indictment does not suggest that they knew the money was coming from Russia, though. Okay, so Dave Rubin, one of these people, if you don't know who Dave Rubin is, he's a liberal conservative political commentator, creator of the Rubin Report. He is, oh my goodness. So talk about someone who ideologically flip-flops, part of Turning Point USA. Yeah, he's a gay conservative commentator who is, he's all over the shop. Not a fan of Dave Rubin at all. So Benny Johnson, who's Benny Johnson? He's one of the main guys that's getting a lot of money from the Russians here. So he's an American conservative political commentator and YouTuber. Began writing for Breitbart, The Blaze, so all these same kind of organized media organizations, the Daily Caller, Turning Point USA, Newsmax TV. So there you go. That's who he is. And then already in Wikipedia, incredible. In August 2024, 2 Russian state media employees were charged with secretly funding almost $10 million into a Tennessee company for the production of political videos for the benefit of Russia by influencing the United States. The company's description matches that of Tenet Media, which had employed Johnson and other right-wing influencers, with him responding that myself and other influencers were victims in this alleged scheme, with a request being made to him to produce content for the media startup Tenet Media, and that he had a standard arm's length deal, which was later terminated. So that was already what we'd heard, but my goodness, it's in there already. And that's indeed what his official line, his official statement was, as per his Twitter post there. Michael Weiss says the low intelligence quotient of these Russian assets seems to have been a feature, not a bug of their enlistment. And that's because he also says in a statement on the leaked DOJ indictment, and it wasn't leaked, it was literally the DOJ indictment. It's like publicly released. As Yasha Ali says, the indictment wasn't leaked. It was unsealed and announced as part of a press conference. Like, you absolute muppet. Anyway, Tim Pool, if you don't know who Tim Pool is, this is he. This is him. He is the guy famous for like wearing a beanie all the time. He is a right-wing political commentator. Became famous originally for live streaming Occupy Wall Street protests, and then has gone down the rabbit hole of like super right-wing, He describes himself as centrist and rejects the left-right political spectrum. Yeah, which is convenient because he sits very firmly on the right and is very much supportive of the pro-Russian narrative. Right, Michael Weiss says, nothing like Tim Pool's numbers among conservatives. You're not dealing with a sort of influential Twitter account. This is a podcaster who's reaching millions and has connections to get him in front of Trump. The US Justice Department indicting Tim Pool's parent company for accepting $10 million in covert Russian funding, or part of $10 million, to direct pro-Russian propaganda content. Tim Pool now claims to be stunned and calls himself a victim of the alleged scheme. So Tim Pool bangs the table and yells, "Ukraine is the enemy of this country." 10,000 rubles, $3 deposited in his account. Well, a little bit more than that. My statement regarding allegations in a leaked DOJ indictment. So again, Tim Pool is calling it a leaked indictment. I think he's obviously in cahoots with Benny Johnson there, and claiming that he was a victim rather than a perpetrator. Ruble Destroyer says, thanks for educating me, Timcast. So Tim Pool, I didn't know literal paid propagandists for Russia are the real victims in all of this. Again, it's yeah. Oh, look, another victim, Benny Johnson. All these people claiming victimhood, but they are a massive part of the problem. And surely you would be wanting to know, if you're getting $100,000 per episode, exactly what that media company might be wanting from you and where that money might be coming from. That's an awful lot of money to be getting for one episode. $10,000. I'd be, yeah, anyway, that's the difference between me and Tim Pool, I guess. Right. Peter Henline says, it doesn't matter if Tim Pool knew it was the Russians who were paying him. What matters is that he was willing to take money to produce content to shape public opinion without telling you. If you still trust him or any of the other hacks on his show, you are a fool. And I'd agree. Well, this didn't age well, says Chris Owicki. What's he referring to? Tim Pool says, the people screaming about Trump working for Russia are the same people demanding social media censor misinformation. Stop listening to these people, says a person indicted for disinformation. Or, if you believe him, misinformation. So just to remind you, the sorts of thing that Tim Pool has said. I think this is one that blew my mind.
They know it. But I don't know that it matters anymore. This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats.
So listen to the anger there. I want to know whether that is, and I did at the time, whether that is genuine. I mean, it seems pretty genuine. Or is that grifting? Or is it genuineness that has developed out of grifting for so long that you end up believing the stuff that you peddle? And you knew you were kind of peddling it initially, but then you're just in that information space where Democrats are evil. Like, Democrats are worse than Putin. And therefore, Ukraine is... But like, that intersection between GOP, religious conservatism, and we've seen this, and there's data now to suggest that that some Republican voters actually approve of Putin as a leader. So look at him because of, and this is not Russia, this is Putin. There's an interesting distinction there. And the data suggests that they approve of Putin because of his pro-religious conservative views and laws that he has enacted there. And so you've started to get this identity merging between, you know, pro-Russian, pro-conservative, culture wars narratives and the GOP, such that if Russia is saying that Ukraine is evil, then you're more likely to take that on as an idea because you are enmeshed within these other ideas, and it's too difficult for people to say, I agree with that but disagree with that. It's like we're so good at doing all or nothing, so it's like, okay, I'll take that all on and I'll just wear that hat. And that hat means that I am anti-Democrat, pro-Russian, anti-Ukraine. Okay, and then you get someone like Tim Pool going and saying this.
But I don't know that it matters anymore. This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine. They are expanding this war. Now, don't get me wrong. I know you've got criminal elements of the U.S. government pushing them and guiding them and telling them what to do.
What criminal element? I mean, it's just massive disinformation, and or at least completely unsubstantiated. So Kremlin agent Tim Pool on air reading off a script supplied to him by Russian intelligence, says Igor Sushko. Now, I don't know. However, Tim Pool, a gullible American, says he didn't know it was the Kremlin who suddenly started paying him $100,000 per episode of his show.
Ukraine is now accused, a German warrant issued for blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, triggering this conflict.
It did not trigger the conflict. It happened after the war started, you absolute muppet, as I said before.
Ukraine is the greatest threat to this nation and to the world. We should rescind all.
So Ukraine is a greater threat to the world than Russia, than China. I mean, are you serious? That's the point. Is this genuinely what you believe?
Ukraine is the greatest threat to this nation and to the world. We should rescind all funding and financing, pull out all military support, and we should apologize to Russia.
So his channel has 1.4 million subscribers. So that is, subscribers to views is actually not as solid a correlation as you'd think. I think, that's why you get YouTubers consistently saying, if you please, like, subscribe and share. They always want people to subscribe because it's more likely you're going to see their videos. But actually, there's a massive disparity. And usually, so I get 50% of my viewers are unique viewers every day. Which means the point is that 1.3 million subscribers means that he's going to have a massive platform that means that all sorts of people are going to be watching the video. 50% unique viewers means that an awful lot of people that aren't subscribed to him are going to be watching that, which means his audience is actually far greater, is kind of my point. But it's such a disturbing video, that. And then you've got this. So Ron Filipkowski, who's the editor-at-large at Midas Touch Network, says, I sure am looking at this Donald Trump Jr. clip with Tim Pool with a fresh set of eyes now. So now you've got compromise going to Donald Trump Jr. Is this, does he receive? Well, actually, we do know that he's been linked to Russia, Donald Trump Jr. And I did a whole segment on him some time back.
What's your opinion on the solution to the Ukraine war?
Cut off the money. It's the only way you get them to the table, right? As long as, we're literally creating the oligarch class of billionaire in Ukraine with whatever's being siphoned off, whether it's Zelensky, whether it's this, while they send young men to die as cannon fodder on the front lines because they couldn't care less. It's fucking disgusting what's going on there.
What is disgusting is what's coming out of your mouth, you absolute reprobate.
That it's allowed to happen, that we shut down anything. It's so obvious. Nothing's ever going to change there if the money keeps flowing. My father would have been like, hey, you got like one more month of this.
What money are you talking about? The money that's flowing from Russia into your pockets, guys? That money? You worried about that?
Shut down anything. It's so obvious. Nothing's ever going to change there if the money keeps flowing. My father would have been like, hey, you got like one more month of this, and if you're not at the table, it's done. Yep. Guess what? Zelensky wouldn't have a chance if we shut it down. So he'd come to the table, and they'd come up with something.
Absolutely. What's your opinion on the solution?
For every video I produce where you got 20,000 people watching it, there's a whole host of these videos where you got millions watching it. The damage that stuff does is insane. And he's getting $100,000 per episode for that from the Kremlin. Right, finally, let's take this a step further and say, okay, so you've got these influencers. How far does this go? And this is, I would call this a form of money laundering. It's information laundering. It's both. It's where money turns into information, and that information gets laundered and goes through so many different conduits and to so many different entities that it ends up being completely disconnected from the Kremlin. And it's a form of laundering that ends up coming out the mouth of someone like Donald Trump at a rally. And the Kremlin sitting back and going, thank you very much. Money well frickin' spent. I've got Donald Trump Jr. sounding off on the podcast over there. I've got Tim Pool sounding off on the podcast. I've got Dave Rubin. I've got all these people. They have taken on all this narrative that we have supplied, that we've put out there. And we have paid these guys to platform that. And then we're just going to sit back and watch it spread like a contagious disease throughout the information spaces, and then end up coming out of the words of the most prominent politician in the United States, and then filtering down into the minds of the people at the rallies and the people watching Fox News, or the people watching Donald Trump say X, Y, and Z, people listening, 190 million followers from Elon Musk, listening to what he has to say, taking that on. That information going into heads of those people is originally from the minds of the propagandists in the Kremlin. And it does it through the contagion of ideas. You can call this memetics. That's where you get memes from, memetics. You can talk about how it travels even further with the help of some money. It just spreads from the Kremlin to the people in the United States and elsewhere. So just to remind you, witting or unwitting, that idea, he says, it makes no difference, witting or unwitting, say something. Okay, so here we have Tenet Media saying, and again, going back to culture wars, DEI, kind of like, equality, recruitment, that culture wars topic, hot button topic, that hot potato that gets thrown around all the time. So Tenet Media, which is this Russian disinformation entity, NASA's DEI trainings include engineers vocalizing they, quote, feel shame for being white and for taking part in white supremacy culture. And then Elon Musk sharing that or responding to that to his 190 million followers. So that's Tenet Media. There's a connection, Tenet Media, Elon Musk. Why is Tenet Media on Elon Musk's radar? And that's just 1 week ago. Now, let's talk about Elon Musk a bit, because he is an absolutely essential cog in this whole process. Talking about Kremlin through to the heads of the minds of the population in America. How many times did Musk promote just one of these Kremlin agents? So we're going to look at Benny Johnson. How many times has Benny Johnson been shared by Elon Musk to his 190 million followers? The answer is a lot. This is just Benny Johnson being amplified by Elon Musk. Seems accurate, he says. Does the public realise? Share, and respond, share, respond. That was just Benny Johnson. And now, Tim Cuss, not Benny Johnson. This is Tim Cuss. Only Benny Johnson's just up there. Tim Cuss here. So this is Tim Pool. This is how often Tim Pool is amplified by Elon Musk. And you got Benny Johnson at the end there. So just one, actually two. There's two of those being amplified by Elon Musk. And there's probably an awful lot more than that. He is involved in this hugely. And then this is what I just turned on Twitter today. And this is Elon Musk's first tweet that gets thrown into my face, as all his tweets do. A Trump victory is essential to defense of freedom of speech, secure borders, safe cities, and sensible spending. Elon Musk. So it's the involvement of the pro-Trump agenda with the Russian agenda, and that merging of the two. And you've got these agents, and then unwitting agents, and then the amplifiers of both. And Elon Musk is at least an amplifier of both the witting and the unwitting agents. So he's the amplifier of Tenet Media, and he's the amplifier of the people who are paid by Tenet Media. And he amplifies all those ideas out to the public and then says, and Trump, and then you get the merging of Trump and Russian ideology. Now, remember, it's worth remembering, of course, that Paul Manafort was Trump's 2016 campaign manager. He was a Russian agent, like directly. He was lobbying for Yanukovych. Go and look at his Wikipedia page to find out all you need to know about Paul Manafort. I've done a video on him before. Absolutely horrendous. He was pardoned by Trump, even though he was a Russian agent and lobbying on behalf of Russia. And it's all really well documented in the Active Measures documentary on Amazon Prime. It's one of the best. Maybe it's come off Prime now. It used to be on Prime. Anyway, you can find Active Measures, even pay for it. It is one of the best documentaries you will ever see. It is so dense with information, and it shows you that Paul Manafort was a Russian agent, and the Trump campaign in 2016 was compromised by Russian influence. He's been pardoned by Trump and then brought back into the Trump campaign. We see him walking around in the RNC, the Republican National Convention. I mean, there you go. We need talked about all this other stuff that I've just been talking about. This alone is a massive problem. Go and watch Active Measures. Anyway, so there is the compromise with the Trump campaign that already exists. Now, Andrew Weissman here says a Russian disinformation campaign has explicit goal of helping Trump win and Harris lose, targeting swing states and specific voter groups, including Hispanics and Jews, and particular media platforms. See, for example, these. We intend to use Facebook and Instagram as well as YouTube, X, Twitter, and Reddit. The resources free from democratic censorship as the main channels of influence to the target audience of the project. So that you just go and see like the Russian how to influence in order to get political party A, candidate A. So, it's obvious that they're talking about the Republicans there. Now, we've had Trump transition team member, which is Robert Kennedy Jr. He wants a place on He's endorsed Trump, wants a place on his administration, transition team member who regularly spews Kremlin propaganda. So Robert Kennedy Jr. is another one of these massive platforms that amplifies that Russian narrative. He thanks a man who the Russian government paid millions of dollars to post this information and help Donald Trump win the election. So Tim Pool, okay, I'm voting for RFK Jr. now. That's when he went to say he's voting for RFK Jr., who was very overtly pro-Russian. And then loads of Tim Pool's supporters went up in arms, and he then went back and said, actually, no, I'm going to vote for Trump still. But you get the point. I mean, either or there. RFK Jr. has also recently endorsed Donald Trump. Watch his space. Well, remember, he was also, RFK Jr., seen with a very happy, smiling, well, both of them happy and smiling, Scott Ritter, who was himself being investigated for the same FARA infractions. So, yeah. It's a merging of all of these camps, isn't it? 2 members of Congress following the Tenet Russian influence operation. So Tenet Media being followed by Representative Eli Crane and Representative Brian Mast there. So again, how far does the influence go in terms of reaching out to American Congress men and women? And, I do wonder where people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who seems to have been silenced for the campaign, and rightly so, and Matt Gaetz, but I wonder where I'd love to see their funding and where their funding's come from. And then you look at stuff like this that came out today, and you wonder, how did this happen? Where's this person getting his information from? So you've got former US Army sniper Daniel Harris has moved to Russia seeking citizenship and wants to help Russia in its invasion, or as he calls it, special military operation against Ukraine. He opposes US foreign policy and is willing to train Russian troops as a sniper instructor, having combat experience from the Middle East.
My name is Daniel Harris. I'm from Colorado Springs, Colorado, in the United States. I'm coming to Russia to not only get citizenship, but do everything I can to help Russia in the special military operation against Ukraine and NATO. And
against Ukraine and NATO.
How this came about is I was in the military, and I saw the horrors and the terrible things that we were doing to defenseless nations for no reason. And I've seen it all over the world, over and over and over. And I've seen the death firsthand, and it's terrible. It destroyed me, and changed my life forever. And I really opened up to it. And the more I reached out to friends in Russia to find more, actual non-propaganda information.
The more I reached out to friends in Russia to find non-propaganda information,
stories, I realized who the real good side was in this, and like I said,
I realised who the real good side was in this. So Russia, the real good side. So how much effect does this Russian information operation have on people in the US, on their voting habits, and indeed to the point where some people up sticks and move to Russia thinking they're the good guys in this. This is incredibly important, this story. It is really good that the DOJ is coming down now on the money and the influence coming from the US and coming down on those people and organizations in the US who are either wittingly or unwittingly part of the Russian propaganda project and influence campaign to influence the election, but past the election, to influence the American people, to influence elections, right? We've seen it in 2016. Was enough done since 2016? I don't know. We're seeing it now in 2024. 8 years has passed and Russia still appears to be able to influence the electoral process. You know, Paul Manafort and all of that back in 2016. 2024, not enough has been done. It's good to see the DOJ pick it up. Anyway, that's enough from me. It's a big one. It had to be a big one. There's a lot of me there talking out loud, wondering about how I would react to such influence moves from entities I didn't know. Be interested on your thoughts about all of this. But I don't like the politics of people like Tim Pool and Benny Johnson, etc., Dave Rubin. I've written for a long time against such people. And it's, for me personally, you know, chickens come home to roost. It's like this doesn't surprise me. And I feel somewhat validated that these people are being directly or indirectly indicted, or certainly seeing the consequences of indictment on these nefarious actors. It is a real shame that the American political system is, I think, as compromised as it really is. But all of our systems are. We've seen this in the UK. We saw this in the Brexit election in 2016, the influence that took place there. We've seen it in subsequent elections. We saw it in the recent European elections. We saw it in the French elections. We're seeing it in the German elections. Taking already existing issues and amplifying them beyond what they otherwise would be, to make them much bigger problems for the electorate than they otherwise would be, and to divide and then conquer. Divide and conquer. That is what the Russians are doing, and they're doing a really bloody good job of it. Anyway, enough of me waffling on. Time to do my normal video. Take care. Speak soon.